Okay, so we got another comparison video coming up. We got a MK7 GTI, currently stage 2, and we're going to do an IS38 turbo swap on it from the Gulf R. First we're going to dyno it, see what it makes now, and see what it makes after the IS38 turbo swap. So I got it mostly strapped down now. I'm just going to fire up the dyno and get the thing up to temperature, all the regular stuff. I'll probably set the camera up in the car so you guys can kind of see as we go. For mods, it has Downpipe, CTS Intercooler. I forget which intake it has, but I'll add all that stuff as we get some more footage and add it in the description and stuff. So let's get to dynoing this thing. All right, so we tried the first one, but the tack signal was crappy, so we're gonna try again here with technically the second run, but one that's gonna actually be recorded properly. So car's obviously up to temp. Let's go through the gears. This is a DSG car, so that will impact horsepower a little tiny bit from what they say. I've never done back-to-back on two different cars, so I don't know for sure. All right, we're ready now. Okay, that makes a bit more sense. 256 horsepower, 292 torque. That was in third gear. We're going to try to back it up and do a fourth gear run. Should get a little bit more power out of it in fourth gear. I'll show you the graphs here in a second, but we're going to give it a minute to cool down and give it another go. All right, fourth gear this time. Did it spin? What happened there? DSG, man. Okay, we're gonna give it one more shot here. Last time it kicked down a gear, so we're gonna give it another go. Okay, that was a little more consistent. So we've done a couple of runs now, but it was bumping back and forth out of gear. So the last run before this was 275, 347 torque. This run was 273 and 345 torque, so very close to each other. So now it's time to get the car apart, put the IS38 in it, and see what we can gain for horsepower. Torque on the IS38 typically is going to be a little bit less from what the data says anyways. I've never dynoed back-to-back, so I don't know 100%, but it should get a pretty good jump in power. So let's get it apart. Okay, so this is the results for the stage 2. The graphs look a little bit weird because this one I hit the kick down and it dropped down a gear, but as you can see it was following the path of the other dyno graph, but the end result was the same power wise. 273, 275, 345, 347, so very consistent. So now, as I mentioned, time to get the new turbo on. You just gotta go towards the windshield. There you go. All right, so today is tomorrow. We get the car back on the dyno. IS38's in it. I've reflashed the ECU with APR's IS38 software, and I've also updated the TCU software. This car was stage 2 before, but it now has the TCU software to match the IS38 turbo upgrade. So also changed the plugs, as you'll probably see in the video, and we're ready to get this thing running and warmed up and see what it can do with the new turbo on it. So let's get to it. Okay, so we're up to temp. we're ready to give this its first pull with the new turbo on it. Let's see how much horsepower we gain out of this thing. So, we didn't actually lose any torque at all, which I was expecting to lose a little bit, but we bumped up to 320 wheel horsepower and 346 torque, which is actually up a torque, one torque, from the previous run. So power definitely carries out way further, and torque surprisingly is a lot broader through a lot of the range. Again, I'll show you in a minute once we get to it. Yeah, surprising for this one. I was really expecting the torque to be very similar, but obviously different turbocharger, so it's going to act different. So although the torque is, I'm rambling here, but although the torque is the same, pretty much the same, the power band itself and where torque is way broader throughout the power band. So again, we'll do another run to back it up, and then I'll show you the graphs and stuff in a second. Okay, so we're gonna give this another run. I gave it a little bit of time to cool down. I got the fan on it this time. First time I didn't have the fan on it, usually to get a little bit more heat into it. So just remember, this is, I just checked for leaks and all that stuff between runs here. This is directly off the hoist, so we basically got the turbo setup done, got it up and running, made sure there was no major leaks or anything, and strapped it on the dyno. So there's been no street driving, nothing like that. Literally had it on the dyno with the Stage 2 software, did the hardware upgrades and flashing it, and back on the dyno to try to keep the comparison as close as we can. Yes, it's been a day since we did the first dyno, but the weather and temperature is all very similar, and we have the SAE correction anyways, so that should really level that playing field out. Other than that, the changes that I've noted is it. So we're gonna give it another run, and let's see if we can back those numbers up. All right, let's do it. Backed them up all within basically 1 horsepower and 1 torque from each other. So it did 319 wheel horsepower that time, but 348 torque, so a little more torque, 1 less horsepower. So I'll probably do 1 more just to back it up one more time. I mentioned to the I mentioned to the client that I'd probably do 3 before and after to give him a really good idea of what he was working with for gains. So give it a little bit more time to cool down and do 1 more rip. That sums it up for this one. I just want to kind of go over the numbers a little bit more now that the fans are all off and it's a little quieter in here. On APR's numbers on their website, I mean, they have very thorough data on there, so it's very interesting to be able to compare real world, always have trouble saying that, real world results on the dyno comparison to what APR has listed on their website. And that's my phone, as always. So on APR's website, the difference on the Gen 3 GTI with the IS38 versus the Stage 2 software is about 60 horsepower in the difference. That'd be crank horsepower. And we're seeing about 50 wheel horsepower gain, and APR also shows about a 10 torque loss, and we're actually seeing the same torque. And if we really look at the numbers, we've seen almost 60 horsepower, or yeah, about 60 horsepower in the difference as the largest gains over the previous file. So as you can see here, once you get past like 3200 RPM, keep in mind this is basically when I was trying to start the car, so I started this a little bit earlier and the dyno run way lower than I normally would. So here is when I actually started the dyno run and started ramping up the car. But if you look at like 3200 RPM and on, horsepower gains the whole entire way, and torque actually is, although peak torque isn't quite the same, or sorry, although peak torque is very similar, as you can tell, but the gains of torque are way larger all the way out to 7,000 RPM. So when you look at peak numbers, you know, you got to really look at the full story, because peak torque versus peak torque between the two high torque files, although they look the same, this car is definitely going to feel a lot different throughout the power band, because there's going to be a substantial increase in both horsepower and torque. And to comment on a couple other things, this is, I don't think I mentioned it in the video, this was running a 91 octane high torque file, previous Stage 2, and we now have the IS38 91 octane high torque file on it as well. The other thing to take note of is I've had a good handful of Mark 7Rs on here, and Stage 2 Mark 7R, it's obviously an IS38, the horsepower and torque is near identical to what this is making now. So basically bolting the turbo on, although yes, it's front wheel drive and it's not a Golf R, this is still going to be a weapon on the highway for sure. So that's going to end it for this one, guys. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to ask them below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. And that's it. Okay, PSA, if you replace your own plugs, make sure you torque them properly. All these plugs came out by hand without even me putting a ratchet on it, and here I go again, taking it out by hand without putting a ratchet on it. So the crush washers weren't even crushed on it. So if you want to make less horsepower, don't torque your spark plugs properly. End of PSA. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording. GoPro, stop recording.